Good morning, everybody. Maybe listen to this. We're starting Bez Hashem Yisborach on Daf Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Normally, when a person does a malacha on Shabbos, there are three things to take into account. If he does it by mistake, he has to bring a common chatos. If he doesn't on purpose, he's been over alav. And if there's Eidim and Asvor, he gets Chiyuv Misa, the death penalty. In our Mishnah, it described that if a person's stuck on Erev Shabbos with his wallet, he's allowed to give it to the donkey. So now the Gemara is going to discuss the halachas. What exactly is the aveira of making an animal work for one on Shabbos? How bad? What does one get? Malchus, Misa, what's the punishment? So the Gemara says like this. We're up to Kufun Gimel Amud Beis, the fifth wide line. Somebody who makes his animal work on Shabbos, Shogeg Chayav Chatos. We're up to the fifth line of the wide lines. Shogeg Chayav Chatos, B'meizid Chayav Skila. That means Rami Bar Chama holds that there's absolutely no difference between making an animal work and doing a malacha on one's own. Both of them, there's chatos, and both of them, there's chiyuv misa. That means he sees making an animal work to the equivalent of, let's say, a bishul or boina. It's the same of it. My tana, Omar Rava, Domar Kop, Luisasecha Melacha Atu Behemtecha. Don't do the melachas, you and your animal, and we darshan. Behemtecha, do you do today? The animal is similar to oneself. Mahu, just like a person himself, if he doesn't have it on Shabbos. B'shugei chayv chatos b'mezid chayv skina. After b'mezid nami b'shugei chayv chatos b'mezid chayv skina. The Gemara says we compare human being to an animal, just like a human being. If he doesn't have it on Shabbos, is chayv misa chatos. Also, an animal who doesn't have it on Shabbos, if you get an animal to carry, one is chayv misa like a normal aveira. Omar Rava shtei tshuvas b'dover. He asks on this two questions. The Torah tells us the halacha of korban chatos by the aveira of avodah zarah. The Torah says don't do an avodah zarah, and if chas v'shalom, if a person does by mistake, he has to bring a korban chatos. So we say huksha kol haTorah kulo avodah zarah. The whole Torah is compared to avodah zarah. Ma avodah zarah dov ma'aseh begufei. Just like by avodah zarah, we talk about whether the person actually does his own aveira. How can you say that a person who makes his animal work on Shabbos is chayav misa and chatos? That cannot be, because there is the chiyuv chatos is learned from where? From avodah zarah. And by avodah zarah, we're discussing that a person doesn't have it himself. Not when a person gets his animal to serve avodah zarah. We learned in the Mishnah, the Mishnah says like this: if you mechal Shabbos and you do something for which you chayav misa and chatos, which you can be medayek, that only certain things there's misa and chatos. The other things there is no misa and chatos. Again, the Mishnah says if you mechal Shabbos and you go and do something which you chayav misa or chatos, it's mashma that there are certain things you can be mechal Shabbos and not be doing issa chatos or misa. What are those things? There must be a way to mechal Shabbos without doing these isurim. What are they? Lav de mechama is not the lav of making an animal work. So he's got two kashas. How can you say that by making an animal work when it's chayav misa and chatos? First of all, the Torah compares it to avodah zarah when a person's doing an avodah by himself, not the animal. And second of all, the Mishnah clearly points out that it's possible for a person to be mechal Shabbos and to be chayav chatos. Mashma that certain times be mechal Shabbos are not chayav chatos. So the Gemara says no, that's not the time. Why not? Look, there are two other Yisurim on Shabbos, which one is not chayav chatos for, and therefore you know raya that we're talking about the lav of mechama, the lav of making animal work. What are the two Yisurim? One is lighting a fire according to Rabbi Yossi. We once discussed this. The Torah says don't do malacha on Shabbos, and then it says Leisivao Eish. And the question is, why does the Torah specify fire? And Rabbi Yossi tells us because fire one's not chayav misa or chatos for. Alternatively, it's the issue of going out of the Tchum according to Rabbi Akiva. So, as to summarize, Rabbi Bar Chama holds that making an animal work on Shabbos is as bad, as doing any other Avir on Shabbos. Any Avir on Shabbos, it's as bad. That means there's no difference between making an animal work on Shabbos to a person doing a malacha himself on Shabbos. Rava questions it from two different places. First, the Gemara says what says right because the Torah puts the two together. Do malacha you and your animals, just like you get chimisa, just like so two animals. And Gemara asks two problems. One is that the Torah is compared to Avodah Zarah, and by Avodah Zarah you do that very yourself. And second of all, the Gemara asks at the end of the day that we have a Mishnah which is meduyak, that there's a possibility of Mechal Shabbos without being chatos. The that's talking about when a person works with his animal. Most says no, that's not a kasha. We could do it chumin or fire. Now the Gemara carries on this topic for some time. We have the dafka from Dalad or Mudalev top of the page. Rav Zid Masni Hachi. The Zid said as follows: Omar Rabbi Bar Chama, a different version of this previous Gemara. Amachama Chabeba b'Shabbos b'Shogig Ein Chayav Chatos, not Chayav Chatos. B'Meizid Chayav Skila. That means it's half. That what? That there is skila, but there's no chatos. Says in Moshe Rava, Machal Shabbos with Rava Shechayav Nashkiyos Chatos. Chayav Nazin is skila. The person is Mechal Shabbos, and he does something which one's Chayav Chatos, and skila. Ho Ein Chayav Nashkiyos Chatos. Ein Chayav Nashkiyos Skila. The Rava wants to medayek the explosion of the Mishnah, the language of the Mishnah. What's the language of the Mishnah? If a person does an aveir on Shabbos for which is Chayav Chatos, and Misa, you can be medayek that if there's no Chatos, then there's no Misa. And therefore, if you Omer Bar Chama holds there's no Chatos, then there can't be Misa either. So Moshe says, no. Who told you to read the Mishnah like that? Mishnah shouldn't be read. You're reading the Mishnah incorrectly. You're interpreting too much into the words of the Mishnah. You should be reading the Mishnah more simply. When there's a Chatos, then there's Misa. That means not every time there's no chatos, there's no misa. No. Every time there is a chatos, there is misa. Meaning, whenever you have chatos, there'll also be misa. But who said to you when there's no chatos, there's no misa? No. There can be a possibility of there being no chatos, and yes, misa. So it comes out like this. That we have now a second version of the halachas of somebody who doesn't have with his animal. What's the second version? The second version is, the first version was a person doesn't have with his animal is chayav chatos and misa. Second version is not chayav chatos, but is chayav misa. What's the svor? Why? What's the rule? What's the svor?
Sorry, isn't that about chatos that it's dependent on whether you have skila?
Oh,
so
that's good. So that according to the second version of Bar Chama, no, there isn't. According to Bar Chama, the second version, that would not be true. It is true that it elsewhere does say that, but that's not according to this one Bar Chama. So what's the logic that you should not be chayav chatos and yes be chayav misa? So we're showing them explain as follows: chayav chatos there isn't because we learn the chayav chatos from Avodah Zarah, and Avodah Zarah we're always talking about when you do that by yourself and not your animal. The chayav misa there is why? Because the Torah says don't do malacha, you your animal. You, your animal, is trying to teach you. You like the animal, just like you, the person himself is chayav misa. So an animal will be chayav misa. Now the Gemara brings a third lashon, a third halacha of understanding what's the din by animals. But in the middle, the Gemara interrupts with a little bit of technicalities. Now it's like this: Rava, Achmed Amori Baruch. Rava, who is the brother of Amori Baruch. Amori. Normally, whenever we mention something, we mention the father's name. Why do you mention Amori Bar Rochel, the son of Rochel, who was a daughter, a woman? Why do you mention the mother, not the father? The answer is because this woman was the daughter of Shmuel, and she was kidnapped, and then so she was raped by the Gosha captive, the kidnapper, and she had a baby. So the father was actually a goy at the time when she had the baby. Now, the Gemara over here is going to bring two different versions of that story which I just said, that Rochel was Nansa. The Gemara says like this: Rava Achad Amor Baruch was the brother of Baruch, V'Omri Lo Avud Amor Baruch, and some say it was the father. Now, if he was the father, the story I just told you cannot be true, because Rava himself was a Yid, not a Goy. And what I said to you was that a Goy was Ma'anas kidnapped and took her. So the Gemara asks, according to the second version, that Rava was the father. Kasha the Rav. Why? Because Rav actually Amoy Baruch Lumani reposted the Bava. What happened was like this. The halacha is that somebody who is a ger is not allowed to get a position of authority in Klal Yisrael. Somebody who is a ger is not allowed to get a position of authority. Does anybody know somebody who was a ger and tried to take a position of authority? There's a few people like that. One of the famous ones was what?
Unclus.
Holders. He tried to take a position of authority. A ger can't take a position of authority. So therefore, Rav felt that Mori Bar Rochel was entitled to be a policeman, even though his father wasn't Jewish. And the reason was because his mother was Jewish, so he's not a proper ger. Since he's not a proper ger, so therefore he's allowed to get a position of authority. Now, if you say that Mori Bar Rochel's father was Rava, so that his father and his mother was Jewish. So if that's the case, what in the world did Rav need to do to permit him to become part of Klal Yisrael? Of course he's part of Klal Yisrael. Of course he's not taking a position of authority. He did nothing wrong. He was actually a proper normal Eid. So the Gemara says like this. If you say that Rava was the father of Mori Bar Rochel, so what in the world is the difference between why did Rav need to appoint him specifically as a policeman? Anyway, he's entitled to be a policeman. So the Gemara answers, maybe there were two. So nicer. If there were two, one of them, Taka, was Nenso, and she was the daughter of Shmuel, and the father was a Goy, who was actually called Issachar, and the other one was called Rava. So therefore, the more now, after we clear away the question of the names, whether Rava was the brother or the father, if it was the father, you have to say there were two more Rachos. Now the more goes on to what he actually said. He was part of everything. Is part from everything. So we had three versions so far. First one says you have chatos and misa. The second one says you don't have chatos, there is misa. And now we're saying you're part from everything. And he explains. If he does it by mistake and not have chatos, why not? The whole Torah is compared to Avodah Zarah, and Avodah Zarah you do not avoid yourself. The amazing the Tanan, because we're dying from our Mishnah. That you're chayav on this mezid eskila. He is medayek the Mishnah. Not like we explained earlier, but he reads the Mishnah that means the Mishnah is trying to say only when you're chayav chatos, then you're chayav misa. And if you're not chayav chatos, there is no misa. Like you said earlier that there's such an expression that one is dependent on the other. So therefore there's no misa either. Okay, so there's no misa and there's no chatos. But what about a lav? What about malchus? There's no Malchus either. Why? This is a principle that comes up from more Malchus. That when the Torah says a pasuk which is forbids something, then normally one gets Malchus for it. The Torah says don't eat chaza or don't eat meat or milk. And if chaza a person does, one gets Malchus. But if in that pasuk, in that forbidden, in that issa which the Torah says, is included a principle of which things one is chayav misa for. For example, over here, where the Torah says don't work on Shabbos. Now, some of the work one is chayav misa. For example, if a person cooks. Some of the work we just said there's no misa. For example, making the animal work. So, since in the same pasuk, the Torah is telling us different things which are forbidden. Some of them which are forbidden and one is chayav misa for, then there's no malchus. Once the pasuk is telling something which is forbidden, and including in that issa, including in that aveva, are possibilities of chiyuv misa, then we take away b'chlal the entire possibility of getting malchus. So any lab which has azoras misa based in, there's no malchus. Says the word top of kufn daled on the base. Even the Kutzman that says you do get malchus, lichter vachmona loisasecha malacha ubem techa. Don't do any malacha and your animals. Why is it telling you to say, don't do any malachas, you and your animals? If you wouldn't say the word you, what would you think? Obviously you. If I say, don't do any malachas and your animals, so you obviously understand that you're not allowed to do malachas and your animals are not allowed to do malachas. Why is it possible to say, you and your animals, atolomali, who knew the mechayev, them to the mechayev? The fact that the Torah says, don't do malacha, you and your animals, what the Torah is trying to say is, you are chayev. If your animal does malacha, there's no chiyuv, and that is what the chiddush of the pasuk over here is. And therefore, the Gemara says, this is how we pass him, that somebody who works with his animal on Shabbos, he is not chav, not chatos, not malchus, and not misa. It's issa deraisa. He's done an avera, but he will not be chav any of the three. So now we finished with the sugya of the animals, and now we're carrying on with the Mishnah. Mishnah says if a person is walking on a Friday afternoon carrying precious items, and then suddenly becomes Shabbos, and now he's scared that the items are going to get lost or broken. So what happens is he has to put them on a donkey and then let the donkey walk and then come into the courtyard. And the first time he comes into town, he has to drop them off the donkey. And he has to drop the items off the donkey. So one says, he gets the outside chotza. What happens, something that she asked this question, if the donkey's got a precious vase, precious glass on it? Now what are you going to do? Undo the straps and let it all fall on the floor. The whole thing will smash and you'll gain nothing by making an animal carry it. So what do? Maybe sauces. You bring pillows, you put it underneath the donkey, and then you undo it and then it all falls. And by doing that, you're making sure that nothing gets broken. What's the problem? Glass is usually not muktzah. If it's a glass bottle or a glass cup, so if it's not muktzah, you don't need to undo the straps. You can just lift them off the donkey's back and put them gently on the floor. Why did everybody have to come up with this complicated solution? Put pillows on the floor and let the sacks fall onto the pillows and they shouldn't smash. Since we talk about glass bottles are not muktzah. Since they're not muktzah, pick them off the donkey's back and put them on the floor gently. Answers the Gemara. He's talking about blood letters. In old days, they did bloodletting. So what they would do is they take a tube, and they'll take blood out of a person's body. Those tubes were always muktzah, because you can't use it for anything. Nobody would use it to drink from, because there were moles. They were despicable. So therefore, since they were muktzah, you couldn't take them off the donkey's back. So the only solution was to let them fall on the floor. Let them fall on the floor, they'll all smash. So that's why I would have said that indeed you have to put a pillow. So again, if it's not
worth a lot of money.
What?
It would be worth a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. They were valuable, yes. As we will see. So again, if it's not muktzah, you can take it off the back. If it's muktzah and it's not fragile, you let them all fall on the floor. If it's muktzah and fragile, then you have to put pillows there and then drop onto the pillows. By letting something fall onto the pillow, now the pillow will be a bosses for muktzah, and you can't move the pillow. So the pillow is going to be stuck there for the rest of Shabbos. And that is called mevata keli meichanoi. You're destroying a keli from its usage. You can't use this keli anymore. Now, what is the issa mevata keli meichanoi? And this is very interesting. Different places the Rishonim say different explanations. What is the issa mevata keli meichanoi? And it's fascinating is that they actually write opposing ideas. Some say that's a problem of soisa. Just like you're not allowed to demolish a house on Shabbos, if you put something down, a pillow down, and then these muktzah items fall on top, what will happen is you'll never be able to move the pillow for the rest of Shabbos. So for that Shabbos, the pillow is unusable. A pillow unusable is like demolishing the pillow. That's what some say, it's soisa. And some say that around, that it's boina, it's building. Why is it boina? Since you'll not be able to move the pillow, it's like you cemented the pillow there. And therefore it's like putting a brick in the floor. And therefore it's building. So either way, sosa keli meichana, we know it's awesome. Either because it's sosa, it's demolishing, or because it's boina, it's building. And either way, you can't put the pillows there to catch the glass which is about to fall. We're talking about very small ones. That means what happens is, you get the pillow, and the pillow is put, if the glass falls onto one pillow, but it's a very small pillow, and then you then roll it from one pillow, you pull away the pillow, and it lands on another pillow. You pull away the next pillow, it lands on the next pillow. And what happens is, it will not smash because there's a lot of different pillows. But each one can be pulled away without becoming mevata keli meichonoi. It won't be stuck there for the rest of Shabbos. Let's say a person's got an animal, and he's carrying tevel, which is muktzah, and glass, which is muktzah. You undo the straps. You've got to undo the straps and let everything fall and smash. It says mefurish and not like Avuna. What did Avuna say? Take glass, take pillows, and put them there. It says, well, that's not true. We see clearly that what does the Brisa say? You have to allow it all to smash. Answers the Mondo. Hasam Bekul, so they were talking about big sheets of glass, which what happens is you would then cut it to size and melt it to size and put them into small windows, where the loss of them smashing was very minute, because even if they would smash, you only need to cut them down to size. And it seems that this smashing would only cause a very small amount of damage. So therefore, you mechuyev to lose the damage that the glasses should break a bit, rather than put pillows there. They can damage it only do it at ever. And the Rashba explains, and it's a nice point. Without this, I don't understand. The Rashba says like this: Tevel, you can't use it now, but afterwards you can use it. How? By taking it to some ices. Similarly, when we talk about glass, we talk about glass that can't be used now, but later can be used very easily. How? By cutting it down to size. So therefore, the Gemara says we're talking about something similar to Tevel. Just like Tevel is something which is cut down to size, also it can be used later through minor adjustments. Also, these glasses we're talking about, we're going to use them later through minor adjustments. Oh, the Brisa says that they're going to break, which is mashba, there is a loss. There is a small loss when they smash. And since there's a small loss, you might have thought that you'd be allowed to. Not. So, again, let's get it clear. Ravuna says, if it's muktzah items, which you can't lift up, if it's not muktzah, you just pick it up and put it down. If it's muktzah, if they're not fajr, let them fall. If it's fajr, I'll put pillows. And then you'll roll it from one pillow to the next. And then take away all the pillows. Says the Gemara, we see that you have to, the Brisa says you have to let the glasses smash. The Gemara answers that we're talking about where it's only a small financial loss, because we're talking about sheets of glass, which are anyway cut down to make a window. Tanya of Shimon Chayim. An animal that's carrying a huge burden of grain. What you do is you put your head, it's got a donkey, which is carrying a huge sack across its back. Now you want to get the sack to fall on the floor. How can you do it? You can't pick it up, it's muktzah. So you stand under one side of the donkey, and you crouch underneath, lift up your head until you're tilted with your head, the sack, and you lift, you stand up straight, and now the sack will be on the slant because you're on one side of the donkey, and it will fall onto the floor. The donkey of Gamliel had jars of honey. He did not want to eat over the Issa of Muktzah, so he didn't unload it until Motzei Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos Mesa, the donkey died from all the burden of carrying the honey the entire Shabbos. Now, as the Lord is going to examine, why didn't Gamliel find a way to avoid the problem of Muktzah? Again, he had a donkey covered in carrying massive jars of honey. And what happened was, he preferred to let the donkey die. He didn't know necessarily for definite the donkey would die, but he knew there's a possibility, rather than be over there some muktzah. Fading a more, what's the problem? Honey is not muktzah. A jar of honey is not muktzah. But it's not muktzah. He should have picked up the honey, taken it off the jar, the donkey, and put it down on the floor. Answers well, the honey had gone bad. Since the honey had gone bad, so therefore it was now muktzah. The Gemara, if the honey had gone bad, hidvish l'may chazi, so who cares? It's a complete waste. It's like something which can't be used at all. It says nothing. The Gemara says no. The gamli. The older days, what they would do is camels would get bumps and bruises and illnesses. So to make them better, what they would do is they would rub honey that had gone bad. So there was a value to this honey. The Gemara, v'yati chabolim v'yiplu, sakin. Why didn't he just undo the straps and let everything fall on the floor like the Mishnah says? Why did he have to let the honey suffer, the donkey suffer the whole fight? The Shabbos, he should have undone the donkey, those straps, and everything would fall. Answers the Gemara, mitztavu ziki. If he would let everything fall on the floor, then what would happen is, then they would all smash, and he didn't want the jars of honey to smash. So let him do what Ravuna said. What did Ravuna say? If everything's going to smash, what should you do? Put pillows and blankets underneath, and then loosen the straps and let everything fall. So Moses says, the jars would spill across the pillars. And then the honey would go across the pillars. Now the keli would not be able to be usable. Once the keli can't be usable, it's mavata keli meichano, which we said before, it's either it's of sois or boina, and therefore you couldn't do that either. Says the Gemara. At the end of the day, there's issa tzab alechaim. So therefore, what was he thinking? Let the issa derais of tzab alechaim overcome the chashash of muktzah. Answers the Gemara, because tzab alechaim do abonon. Since tzab alechaim is only do abonon, so therefore he felt that since the issa muktzah is do abonon and tzab alechaim is do abonon, there's no reason to overcome one do abonon for another. So
Tzab alechaim only do abonon.
It's a machlokes the Gemara b'mitzia, where the tzab alechaim is derais do abonon. So the Gemara says from here at least we can see the Gamliel holds that it's to Abban. Because if Gamliel holds it's to Raisa, then what he would have done is he would have been over the Issa to Abban on Muktzah to avoid the Tzab Alechaim de Raisa. But since Gamliel held the Tzab Alechaim de Abban, it's Machlokes in Bometzia, where the Tzab Alechaim is to Raisa. Says the Gemara like this: Abai Ashkechel el Rabba k'mashav shefel librei agav adecham. Abai saw Rabba on Shabbos afternoon. Rashi explains he wanted to give his child some fun. So how do you give your child fun? You take him to the park and they go down a slide. In the older days, they never had plastic. So finding a slide was not very easy. So what did Rabba do? He took his son to a donkey. And a donkey, the side of the back of the donkey is like slidey. So Rabba would put his son on top of the donkey and let the child slide down the flank of the donkey. So that was his ability to give his son pleasure on Shabbos. It's unbelievable to see how these great Tanoim and Amorim, who never wasted a moment of their lives, still felt that it's very, very important to spend time with the children. Somebody once showed me Talmud Chacham that the Gemara Chulin compared to be these two Gemaras. That Abai himself was a Kohen and never did Duchening. Why not? Because Abai said, I'm too busy. And yet here, his Rebbe, even though Abai was too busy to do Duchening, his Rebbe had time to play with his children. And there's a very big problem. The halacha is not allowed to use animals on Shabbos. So how could Rabba use the donkey as a slide? You're using animals. It's the side of an animal. Top of an animal is forbidden. The side of an animal is permitted. He says, well, we're not Tema. How do you know this? Now, we're going to describe, it's a bit difficult to describe. There are different kinds of sacks on the backs of a donkey. The Mishnah says that if the donkey is carrying a heavy burden, you loosen the straps and everything falls on the floor. Now, when everything falls on the floor, what's going to happen is you have to undo the strap. It's the only way to get the sack to fall on the floor is to undo the strap. How can you undo the strap? How do you undo the strap? So, if you picture a donkey, the older days, what they used to do is they used to have these bags which would hang on either side of the donkey's back. And from bag to bag would be a long string or rope. And the only way to loosen it is you lift up the rope and then take it down to fall on the floor. Now, the only way to do that is to stand by the donkey and lean on the donkey's flank and pick up the rope. So you can see that you're using the flank, you're using the side of the donkey. That's how Rashi explains. A bit difficult. Why can't you stand a bit further away and lift it up? The Rashi's mashma, the only way to get there was to literally lean on the donkey and then lift it up. This says even in a more interesting way, that when you lift up the ropes, if you think about it, so what happens is the bags go inwards. When they go inwards, they start leaning onto the donkey's flanks, on the donkey's sides. So you see that we don't mind. You have to picture it a little bit. You've got a donkey, you've got bags, you need to take the bags off. So what's the best way? So Moses says, we lift up the bags. When you're lifting up the bags, you're either going to be leaning on the donkey, or you're going to have the bags leaning on the donkey. Either way, you're using the donkey, therefore it should be awesome. And it's a raya that we don't mind using the sides of an animal. Says the Gemara, my lab, Gavanki, the Havlut starting. Gavanki means these straps, which is starting. It's starting to go to Rabbanon. Look, the Chova Agavanki to have it started Nami Balachsa. The Gemara over here says there are two other ways that the straps could be made where it's not a problem of using the donkey. The one is lachta and one is chova agalvanki. And they're both, again, you have to just get a picture. Agalvanki is very similar to the belts of the olden days. The olden days, what you do, nowadays a lot of people have buckle belts. They're not buckle belts. What you do is you have a strap with little holes inside it every 2 centimeters, and a metal piece that comes out. And then what happens is you tighten it around your body, and then you put the metal in the hole and you strap in the belt. How do you undo such a belt? How do you undo it? So what you do is you lift up the end of the belt, you pull it up. By pulling it up, then the metal which goes in comes out, and then the belt is open. So the Gemara says that's the kind of strap they used. Where what happened was you didn't need to go lean on the donkey. You just lifted the end of the belt, pulled it upwards, then the metal piece would automatically come out, then the whole thing would drop. That's agavanki. And what's lachta? Lachta is a different kind of strap, where basically you have two ropes, and at the end of each rope you have a metal ring, and then you put a piece of wood inside the metal rings, and in that way that keeps it on the shoulders back, on the back of the donkey. Once you pull out the stick, the rings automatically fall out and the ropes fall away. So what happens is like this. The Gemara says we're not talking about the kind of straps where you actually have to lean on the donkey or use the donkey's sides. We're talking about the kind of straps where you can just pull something or lift something and everything falls on the floor, so you've got no right. So now the Gemara is going to discuss, are tzadin mutter or asa on Shabbos? Is one allowed to or forbidden to use tzadin on Shabbos? And this comes to a few nafkiminahs, because Chazal said you're not allowed to use an animal, so can you lean on the side of an animal? Alternatively, Chazal said you're not allowed to use a tree. Can you lean on the side of the tree? So this is what the Gemara is discussing now. Esvi. The Mishnah over here we discuss is a Mishnah in Sukkah, where a person builds a Sukkah using a tree as one of the walls. So the halacha is like this. If there are two walls made by human beings, on one of the walls of the Sukkah is a tree, and 3 walls for a Sukkah is enough. Ksheva, that's good enough. But you can't go to it on Yom Tov. At this stage of the world, the Gemara understands that whenever you go into a Sukkah, you're going to use the walls of the Sukkah. Why? Because Chazal explained, and Meiri explains that what happened was in those days, they used to hang things on the schach, they used to hang things on the walls of the Sukkah, so they used to use the actual Sukkah. So that's why you can't go into the Sukkah on Yom Tov. Why? Because you're going to use the tree. You've got 2 walls which you made. One wall is a tree. The wall which is a tree, you're not allowed to use on Yom Tov. So therefore, you can't go into on Yom Tov. We're not talking about when you've got a tree. And then what happens is you cut grooves into the side of the tree, put pieces of wood inside it, where what are you using? Davlut stodin, but stodin asoin. We'll talk about in the Fosha case, where you talk about the actual sides of the tree. And it's a raya, not like Rabbah, because Rabbah said that stodin is mutter. So the Gemara says, no, we're not talking about stodin. Look, the coffee in the ilam, you bent the entire tree, you took the top of the tree, bent it down, and now you're actually using the top of the tree as a wall. You're not using the sides of the tree, you're using the tree itself.
How can you then have a sukkah surrounded by trees? Isn't that a problem? There's a thing that you can have sukkah where the trees are all the walls for the sukkah.
Yes.
And the schach isn't the trees. Isn't that a problem of using the trees as your wall?
Oh, the Gemara discussed that. Very good. Very good. The Gemara asks that. So the Gemara says, you're using the tree. If we made by human hands, if you bent the actual tree and you're using it, why can you use it on Yom Tov? It should be forbidden, because at the end of the day you're going to use it, and using a tree on Yom Tov is forbidden. Says, according to you, that's not an asun. Either way, the Mishnah is difficult. If you hold that we're talking about using the sides of the tree, and using the sides of the tree is forbidden, so why by 2 is it forbidden? And when you've got 3 walls, okay, is it permitted? And if you say you talk about the top of the trees, you've got the same question again.
By 3, it's using it. If you were to take away the tree, it would be fine.
That's what the Gemara answers. We're talking about very, very thick trees, where the trees themselves, the actual top of the trees, that's the wall. That means we're talking about a tree that has a tremendous amount of branches and leaves. You make the tree itself into a wall. And therefore, that's the difference. When you've got 2, if you would take away the tree, the whole schach would fall in, so you're actually using the tree. But when you're using 3 walls, even if you take away this tree will still stand, and therefore the schach will still stand, and the sukkah will still stand, and therefore since the sukkah will still stand, it's okay. Since the Mishnah says that the question is whether the sukkah will stand or not, so there's nothing to do with using the sides of the tree or the top of the tree. The problem is that if you take away the tree, the whole sukkah will fall in. So again, we're talking about when using the tree itself as a wall. When you have two walls made by human hand and one by a tree, so then we say it's okay. Why is it okay? Because we say so when it's two walls by human hands and one by a tree, then it's no good. Because what happens is if you take away the tree, the whole sukkah will fall in, and if the sukkah falls in, therefore when you're using the sukkah, you're using the tree, and therefore it's forbidden. And if you've got three walls besides for the tree, so therefore we consider it as separate, and then we consider it as a proper sukkah without the tree, so you're not using the tree, so it's okay. It says, well, let's say this question of whether the sides of a tree are permitted or forbidden is a machlokes tanoim. It's machlokes tanoim if you're allowed to go into a sukkah which is made out of trees or not. My labo, the ma'asova studied asur, or ma'asova mutor. The machlokes when you're allowed to go into a sukkah made out of trees is a machlokes and it's studied the mutor also. Well, by look, the kulam it's studied asur, and of course studied is also. That means like this: you got a tree. By the side of the tree, you cut a hole into the tree. Let's say you bang a big nail into the tree. So the nail is considered studded, and from the nail you hang a beam. So the beam is tzidei studding, and the machlokes is regarding tzidei studding, sides of sides. That means the Chazal said we do abundant you shouldn't use a tree. Why shouldn't you use a tree? Because you might come to break a branch and be over there self-kotza. So therefore, the question is, how far did they take the gzeira? They said that studding in the sides of the tree is forbidden. What about tzidei studding? What about the sides of sides? So one said, look, the kulam studding asur. What tzidei studding k'mifri? Ma'asovat tzidei studding asur, or ma'asovat tzidei studding mutorim. The machlokes is whether the sides of sides is also. What no? Man dosa bit studding also not bit tzidei studding. Or man dosa bit tzidei studding shalom bit studding. Rava says that's not true. If you forbid the side of the tree, you forbid the side of the sides. If you permit the sides, then you permit the sides of the sides. According to Rava, the question of sides is dependent on the question of whether sides is forbidden. According to Abai, no, even if you hold sides is forbidden, you can hold sides of sides is permitted. What sides of sides? Where you put a stick or nail into the tree, and off that you hang other beams. So those beams are considered sides of sides. Says the Gemara, Mishash asks Rav a question. No, it's top of Kufnun Heimud Aleph, Yosit Beilon. What happens is a person wants to make an Eruv. Eruv, let's say, Chatzeus, Eruv Tchubit, where you have to have food where, let's say what Eruv Tchubit, where you have to put food down in a place 2,000 amas away, and where your food is considered where your home is, and therefore that's where you're planning to settle for the Shabbos. So what happens is, instead of putting it on the floor, you hang a peg to a tree. With tolabo kalkolo, and on the peg you hang a basket. The man of Masad Tvochim, if it's 110 Tvochim, because since it's 110 Tvochim, it's considered Rishus separate from the Rishus Rabbim. So therefore, it's not part of where you're planning to settle for Shabbos. You're planning to be on the road, and here you've got to hang it in the food in a basket, which is hanging from a tree, which is a Rishus Yochid. The matter masod tvachim lo naten tvach beruv eruv is a good Tam, and the whole reason is the noatz yoset beilo that you made a peg in a tree. Olo noatz. But if you want to do a peg in a tree, which is tzidei studded, because a peg is one side, the basket hanging off the peg is the side of the side. So therefore, that's why it is okay if it's lower than 10 tvachim. But if it would be lower, but if it would be the side of the side, I feel it would never be an eruv. Why would it not be an eruv? Because at the end of the day, it's considered studding. So therefore, you see that even though studding is forbidden, studding is permitted. So the Gemara says, he forbids by studding, yet he permits by studding. We'll talk about a basket, which the opening of the basket is very, very small. We're talking about when you put food in a basket, and the basket itself is very, very tight and very hard to get into it. So therefore, when you try to get food out of the basket, you're going to end up having to move the whole tree. And it's forbidden to move a tree on Shabbos. So again, if the fact that it's studding, we're not discussing studding and silly studding, we're discussing a completely different problem. We're discussing a situation where the only way to get the food out of the basket is to move the whole tree. And therefore, that is why you can't rely on it. Mashenking, according to Abaya, he will say, no, The reason over here is because Sidit started is okay. Hilchas L'Gmor Paskin started Asuin, Sidit started Mutar, size of size is Mutar. So, for example, let's say a woman wants to make a washing line. So what she does is she takes a tree and she bangs a nail into the tree. And from the nail, she hangs a string which ties to something else. So she could use that rope because that rope is Sidit started. Now they said Sodom Asun. Hey, Daga, let's say you've got a tree and you want to climb up the tree. So what you do is you put a ladder onto the side of the tree, the medallia that you want to go up. You can't put it against the tree. If you put a ladder against the tree, can you climb up the ladder on Shabbos? No. Because by climbing up the ladder, you're leaning the ladder on the tree, and leaning the ladder on the tree is no good because you're losing the sides of the tree. What you should do is like this. You should get a beam, attach the beam to the tree, and then lean the ladder on the beam which is hanging from the tree. So then that way you're doing tzedek stodim. And when you climb up the ladder, you shouldn't step onto that beam coming off the tree. Because again, you should study. Rather, you should lean on the beams. That means, let's say you've got, let's say, a big nest or a tree house. You want to get there. Well, let's say, or a hut, because the tree house would be forbidden to go to on Shabbos. You've got a second floor house. You want to get up to the second floor. So you've got a tree nearby. You can't put the ladder base leaning on the tree. Rather, you should put the ladder leaning on the beam coming out of the tree. Then you're using tzedek stadin. And then you must not stand on that beam, because by standing on that beam, what's going to happen is you're going to be over on using stadin. That's how we pass it, but stadin is forbidden, tzedek stadin is permitted. So was Rabbi okay by letting his child slide the side of the donkey? Was Rabbi doing right or wrong? What would you say?
Wrong, because he's using
wrong. Yes, what Rabbi did was we pass it would be forbidden. If you want to take your child to play on Shabbos, you cannot allow him to slide down the sides of a donkey. You're going to have to take him to a proper slide. What could you do? If you can get a stick to hang off the back of the donkey, then you can make the child sit on that stick, because that would be considered tzedek stadin. Or if you've got a tree, and from the tree is hanging a nail, from the nail is hanging a hammock, so some people are machbit where by leaning on the hammock, it's going to make the whole tree tilt, then you're making the whole tree move. That is forbidden. If it's a very, very strong tree, where even when you sit on the hammock, it's going to have no effect on the tree whatsoever, and the hammock is tzedek stadin, then it is permitted. What? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. If you've got a ring on a tree, and then off the ring is a swing, are you allowed to use it?
As long as it doesn't make the tree move, because you'll be making the tree. Yes, that would be tzedek stadin. I was going to get to the next Mishnah, but I think it's a mistake because we did quite a lot already. So what we'll do is we'll carry on with on Friday from the Mishnah. We're stopping now. We'll do a few quotes from now. That's easy, fast, and I'm gonna be misricht, misabel on the Chuman properly. Okay, okay, God,